about the motion picture made by this Navy man, Newhouse?
We're working on that.
How does it look?
Impressive.
Can I see it?
It's being analyzed.
When the film is available, will I be able to take a look at it?
As soon as analysis is completed, you'll see it. Satisfied?
Yeah. How long will that take?
About a week. We're doing an exhaustive check on the Newhouse stuff. Really putting it through the ringer. When we're through, we'll forward a print to the Director of Intelligence with a complete report of our analysis.
Fill me in on Newhouse. Would you consider him a qualified observer?
He rates as a top flight observer, an extremely competent one. Immediately upon getting word of his sighting, he dispatched an investigator from Travis Air Force Base to interrogate Newhouse. The exact date of his sighting was July 2nd at 11 a.m., Mountain Standard Time.
I was driving on U.S. Highway 30 South with my wife and our son Delbert and our daughter Ann. We were on our way from Washington, D.C. to Portland, Oregon on vacation before reporting to my new duty station at the Aviation Supply Depot, Naval Supply Center, Oakland, California. About 7 miles after we passed through Train Mountain, Utah, my wife noticed a group of objects in the sky which she could not identify. I pulled over to the side of the road, stopped, got out, looked up and saw the objects. There were about 12 of them in a rough formation proceeding in a westerly direction. They were like nothing I'd ever seen before, although I've logged some 2,000 hours in the air. They were identical in appearance.
How would you describe these objects?
Like two saucers, one inverted over the other. I had no means of judging the altitude. It appeared to me to be about the size of B-29s at 10,000 feet.
Did you photograph them immediately?
I watched the objects for a few moments before getting my camera out of the suitcase. Then I lost more time getting film out of the second suitcase and loading the camera. When I first saw the objects, they were almost overhead. By the time I had the camera ready to go, they had moved to a considerably greater distance.
What kind of a camera did you use?
A 16-millimeter Bell & Howell, Filmo Auto Loadmaster with the 3-lens turret. I selected a 3-inch lens and set it on f8 and focused at infinity.
Did you think of using slow motion?
No, the camera was set on 16 frames per second, and in the excitement of the moment, I didn't think to shoot at a greater rate, although that would have improved the coverage. I centered the viewfinder on the objects and made the first shot. Then I decided that if the sky were darker, the objects would show better. So I stopped the lens down to f16 and continued photographing. This proved to be a mistake, as the quality of the film would have been better had I left it at f8.
Did these objects remain together in a group at all times?
No, toward the end, one object reversed its course and proceeded away from the rest of the group. I held the camera still and allowed this single object to pass through the field of view, picking it up again later in its course.
Did this single object return to the rest of the group?
No, I allowed it to pass through the field of view of the camera 2 or 3 times, and then it disappeared.
In what direction?
Over the eastern horizon.
What did you do then?
I turned, swinging the camera just in time to see the rest of the group disappear over the western horizon.
What was the weather?
The weather was bright and cloudless.
Visibility good?
The visibility was excellent.
How does this film you shot compare with what you saw with your naked eye? You have studied the film.
Yes, I've studied it. I'm very disappointed. The film falls far short of showing what I saw with the naked eye, due to the delay in getting the camera started and my air exposure. If I'd had this camera in the seat beside me, loaded and ready to go, there'd be no need for questions. The Air Force would have the answer.
What is your full name, please?
Delbert Clement Newhouse.
And you are on active duty with the Navy?
Yes, sir, I am.
What is your official Navy rank?
My title is Chief Photographer. I'm a commissioned warrant officer, United States Navy.
How long have you been in the service?
21 years.
Now, is there anything you can add to the description of these objects?
They had a bright silvery color.
Can you describe some particular detail?
They had a metallic appearance. They seemed to be made of some kind of polished metal.
The Newhouse film, as I told you, is presently under analysis. Sergeant, would you get me the Fargo case? The Fargo sighting was October 1st, 1948. A National Guard lieutenant, thank you, a National Guard lieutenant was about to land his F-51 at Fargo Airport.
Captain Ruppelt gave me the details from the record. The pilot, after a routine patrol flight, was cleared by the tower to land when he asked,
Anything in the way?
There's a Piper Cub below you. Nothing else in the air.
I see the Piper Cub. I see another light about 1,000 yards ahead of me. It looks like the tail light of a plane.
I can see you, but I can't see the light you're observing.
the pilot told the tower he could see it and was going to close in and try to make identification.
I can see it clearly now. A small white light. It keeps blinking on and off.
As he approached it, the blinking light became clear and steady. Suddenly, it pulled into a sharp left bank.
I think this thing is going to make a pass on the tower.
I see it now. I see it.
The pilot dived on the light, and although he brought his manifold pressure up to 60 inches, he reported,
I can't seem to catch up with the thing. It's gaining altitude and it's just made an impossible turn. A 90-degree turn to the left.
You're right. It's gaining altitude on you. And it's still in a very tight left turn.
by that time they were at 7,000 feet, when, suddenly, the light made a 90-degree right turn.
It's headed straight at me.
The light passed directly over your canopy at, I estimate, about 500 feet.
The object suddenly shot straight into the air. The pilot followed it to 14,000 feet when his plane went into a power stall. The object disappeared. The chase had lasted approximately 27 minutes.
The officer in the tower was the airport traffic controller. The lieutenant was an instructor for the French during the Second World War. He said he was sure there was an intelligence behind the movements of the lights. He stated, too, that no earthborn pilot could have withstood the G-factor inherent in the object's turns and speed without blacking out.
Was there radar at the field?
No, there wasn't.
Too bad. Radar would have made it airtight.
Not necessarily.
I thought a radar return was indisputable evidence.
No, it isn't.
Are you a radar expert?
No, I'm not, but I have one on tap. Give me extension 361. We have a team of 3 radar analysts here in Air Phenomenon Branch. I want to talk to Wynn Swanson. All radar reports received here pass through this radar analysis division. Swanson? I have a man here from the Pentagon. He's cleared. Wants to know about radar. Mm-hmm. Okay. The field's socked in solid with fog, but he'll take you over to GCA. This is ground control approach. With zero visibility, GCA picks up the aircraft coming in, and by means of the pips on their scope, can talk them into a landing. Now this scope here gives the aircraft in the area. This scope here tells you whether you're to the right or the left of the landing strip, and that one there tells you whether you're too high or too low. Now the next scope is the same as this one, except that it gives you more accuracy.
Patterson, GCA. This is Air Force 2162, past Fairfield, fan marker inbound. Request landing instructions.
There you can see him on the screen. And you can track him all the way in. He's flying blind.
Steer right to heading 20 degrees and begin descent to 1,500 feet.
This is Air Force 162, steering 20 degrees, descending to 1,500. Over.
Air Force 162, the weather at Patterson Field is 100 feet ragged ceiling. Visibility 1/2 mile. Light rain. Wind southwest 6. Altimeter 998.
If you can see it on radar, there can be no question about misinterpretation.
In this case, no. These are good, solid blips.
This is Air Force 162, roger on the weather and runway. Over.
Air Force 162, steer left to heading 35, turning downwind leg. range 8 miles south. Over.
This is Air Force 162, steering 35, over.
Sometimes a temperature inversion will cause trouble. Ionized clouds or equipment malfunction will cause false blips.
Can you tell a false blip from one made by aircraft?
Yes, any experienced operator can tell in a minute or so.
Air Force 162, steer left to heading 215. This will put you on final approach.
This is Air Force 162, roger. Steering 215, over.
Air Force 162, this is your final director. How do you read me? Over.
This is Air Force 162. You are loud and clear, over.
Air Force 162, roger. Your range is 7 miles. Slow aircraft to descending speed. Make final flap setting. Maintain altitude of 1,200. Heading 215. Do not acknowledge any further transmission unless unable to comply. If you do not hear GCA for any 5-second interval, climb to 1,000 feet on a heading of 125 and contact approach control. Steer right to heading 210, range 5 miles. You are now approaching glide path. Start normal rate of descent at 600 feet per minute. Entry to glide path good. Steer left to heading 212, range 4 miles. Go above glide path 10, 15, 25 feet high. Increase your rate of descent slightly. Heading 212. Holding you on the center line. Holding 2 feet high on glide path. Check that descent. Steer right to heading of 213. Range now 3 miles. Holding glide path very well. Go below glide path 10, 20, 30 feet. Level off slightly. Steer right to heading 214. Coming back nicely to glide path. 25, 20, 15 feet low. Heading 214 had you lined up with the center line. Range 2 miles. Holding 15 feet low on glide path. Bring it up slightly. 10, 5. Now on glide path. Range 1.5 miles. Heading 214 on glide path. Steer left to heading 213 over the end of runway on center line. On glide path as you approach point of touchdown. Touchdown in 3 seconds. If you cannot see the runway, pull up and climb to 1,000 feet, heading 125. Safe at home.
Well, that's it. Coffee?
Yes. What exactly is your job here, Swanson?
I'm one of a group of 3 radar specialists employed by the Air Force. Reports of radar contacts of unidentified objects are sent in to us from all over the world for analysis.
How long have you been in Air Force intelligence?
2 years.
Ever come across any cases you couldn't solve?
We have unsolved cases, yes. Cases where good solid blips appeared and no known objects in the area. Then, too, we have cases of fantastic speed.
Exactly what do you mean by fantastic speed?
I mean speeds greater than any achieved by man.
How much greater?
Thousands of miles per hour.
Thousands of miles. What's your idea of what they are?
All I can say is unknown. You must remember that I've been restricted to only radar contacts. I have no experience with visual contacts.
What do you think about the chances of these objects having intelligence behind their control?
All I can say is I have an open mind.
What do you think about the theory of interplanetary source?
I have an open mind, period.
I spent a full week in Dayton. I had hoped to see the Newhouse film before returning to Washington, but it was still under analysis by the Wright Field Photo Lab. When the analysis was completed, the film was taken by an Air Force courier and hand-carried to Washington to be viewed by the Director General of Air Force Intelligence.
It is. All set, Major?
Yes, sir.
Air Technical Intelligence has reported that this film could not be produced under simulated conditions.
Let's go. There'll be several feet of blank film before the pictures come on.
The film, as Newhouse had predicted, was in bad condition, but the chief interest was in movement, speed, and light source. After a moment, the general asked to see it again.
How about that?
Those were the only words spoken in the room. How about that? A few days later, Major Fournet had some news for me.
We got the analysis of the Newhouse film from Air Materiel Command.
What does it show?
Not birds, not balloons, not aircraft, not faked. With a telephoto lens used, weather balloons within 5 miles distance could have been determined on the film. At a greater distance than 5 miles, they could not attain the speeds calculated. Within a 5-mile range, an aircraft of 40-foot wingspan could have been clearly determined. In excess of 5 miles, the speeds of the objects are greater than aircraft could achieve, except in a straight-line speed run. No bird is sufficiently reflective as to cause the film to react as strongly as it is done.
If they're not birds, not balloons, or aircraft, and the film isn't faked, what can these things be?
The official conclusion is unknowns.
The Newhouse film was only the overture. A few minutes before 1 a.m., July 20th, 1952, the curtain on the first act of the Washington drama went up. The unknowns moved in for the first time over the national capital. I had always regarded myself as a man with an intuitive nose for news. So, through the first Washington sighting, while the saucers hovered over the city, I was in bed, sleeping soundly through it all. When I reached my desk that morning, we were flooded with newspaper queries. Telephones were jangling throughout the day. Irate editors from all over the country were insistently demanding more specific information. Newsmen from the wire services, reporters from local and out-of-town newspapers were hemming me in, belaboring me with questions for which I had no answers. For the first couple of hours, we at the press desk had a terrible time getting the story straight ourselves. But bit by bit, I managed to piece it together. There had been both visual and radar contacts. Andrews Field, the Air Force installation, had radar returns similar to those on the CAA radar. Jets had been scrambled in an attempt to make an intercept of the UFOs, but they had not been successful. The week after the Washington saucer sighting was a mad, chaotic one. The story was headlined from coast to coast. As the PIO man assigned to answer saucer questions, I had been under an incessant barrage of inquiries day and night by newsmen. I could get no sleep, no rest at all. Among other things, the Washington Daily News published an interview with Harry G. Barnes, Senior Air Traffic Controller, Civil Aeronautics Administration. Barnes stated, "There is no other conclusion I can reach but that for 6 hours on the morning of the 20th of July, there were at least 10 unidentifiable objects moving above Washington. They were not ordinary aircraft. I could tell that by their movement on the scope. I can safely deduce that they perform gyrations which no known aircraft could perform. By this I mean that our scope showed that they could make right-angle turns and complete reversals of flight. Nor, in my opinion, could any natural phenomena account for these spots on our radar." Then, exactly a week later, it really broke loose. It was the night of July 26, 1952. At 10:30 p.m., I received a phone call from Ray Nathan at CAA. Hello.
Chop?
Yeah.
Ray Nathan, get down here right away.
What's up?
The radar at Washington National is picking up unknown.
Again?
The press is hounding me for a statement. I don't know what to tell them.
Dee, bring my coat and the car keys. Stall them off. I'll be right over.
A couple of guys from Life magazine are here with a camera.
Stall them, too.
What's the matter?
Radar is picking up unknowns over the Capitol. Don't wait up. At 11:10 p.m., Major Forte received a call from Lieutenant Colonel Thomas, Air Force Intelligence Duty Officer at the Pentagon, informing him of what was going on at Washington National. As I raced to the airport, I kept glancing up through the windshield, expecting to see the things, but everything seemed normal.
Am I glad to see you?
They tell us we need your okay to get into the radar run.
You can't get in, boys. I'm sorry.
We want some pictures of that scope, Al.
You can't photograph the scope.
Why not?
It's under security measures, classified wavelength, classified code names.
Here we are in the biggest story in history, and you're keeping us out.
Sorry, but that's the way it's got to be.
Then we're going over your head, Al.
Colonel Dick Searles. You can reach him at Metropolitan 89898.
Another one.
Look at him go.
One of them is an airliner. It's a slightly different shape.
Did you alert the Air Force?
I called Air Defense Command.
What'd they say?
They're scrambling a couple of jets.
Same as last week?
Uh-huh.
Could this be caused by temperature inversion?
Inversion? That is an inversion, and it's different than the ground clutter we pick up.
Did you call the Air Force Command Post at Pentagon?
No, we work through Filter Center.
I'd better call them. Get me the Pentagon Air Force Command Post. This is Al Chop. I'm at Washington National. Have you heard about the unknowns here tonight?
We've been alerted. There's a blue flight on the way there right now.
Okay.
Washington Control to Flight 639, come in.
Flight 639 to Washington Control, over.
Washington Control to Flight 639. You're approaching traffic on your left. Can you see it? Over.
Andrews Tower to Washington Control. We show an unknown just to the left of Flight 639.
Flight 639 to Washington Control. We can see that traffic on our left, over.
Washington Control to Flight 639. What does the traffic look like? Over.
Flight 639 to Washington Control. It's a light, a blue-green light, over.
Washington Control to Flight 639. Can you make out what type of craft it is? Over.
Flight 639 to Washington Control. No. We can just see a light, a blue-green light, over.
Washington Control to Flight 639. Roger, out.
This is Bluebird 1 to Washington Control. Come in.
The jets are coming on now. Washington Control to Bluebird 1. Change course to 225 degrees. Bluebird 2, hold your course. Over.
Bluebird 1 to Washington Control. Wilco, out.
Bluebird 2 to Washington Control. Wilco, out.
They're gone.
Andrews Tower to Washington Control. All our unknowns vanished shortly after the jets appeared. Do you still have any of the unknowns? Over.
Washington Control to Andrews Tower. The same thing happened here. Out. Washington Control to Bluebird 1. All the unknowns had disappeared.
You say those returns are the same as those you got last week?
The same as last week.
At this point, Major Fournet arrived with a Navy electronics intelligence officer.
Gone?
Like that.
As soon as the jets came on the scope, the unknowns left.
Bluebird 1 to Washington Control. We're going back to the base and refuel. Can't see anything around up here. Visibility is good. Over.
Washington Control to Bluebird 1. Roger. Out.
Were they good returns?
Good returns.
Has the set been checked for malfunctions?
The radar equipment is in perfect operating order.
They're back.
Andrews Tower to Washington Control. They're back. Just as the jets left our scope. They dropped back in again out of nowhere. You got them? Over.
Those blips are solid.
They're good and solid.
Washington Control to Andrews Tower. Same thing happened here.
Get me the Pentagon command post.
They're all over the scope. 2 in the northeast quadrant, 4 in southeast quadrant, 3 in southwest quadrant, 3 in northwest quadrant. Over.
This is Major Fournet calling from Washington Control. Radar is picking up 14 unknowns again. The chief controller tells me the unknowns disappeared from the scope as soon as the jets came in and were picked up again when the jets left. The Navy electronics intelligence officer confirms that the unknown blips are good and solid. I recommend a couple of more jets be sent up immediately to investigate. Yes, sir.
Andrews Tower to Washington Control. That's the way we had them. One just moved from the northwest quadrant into the southeast quadrant. It stopped over the White House.
They're scrambling a couple of more jets.
Washington Control to Andrews Tower. Roger on the change. Now it's moving back. Do you get it? Over.
It's back in the northwest quadrant. Over.
Washington Control to Andrews Tower. Roger. We've got a scramble out.
What are those?
Slight temperature inversion.
You can see the difference in the returns. One strong, the other weak. These unknowns are solid objects.
Red Dog 1 to Washington Control. We're approaching the area. Over.
Washington Control to Red Dog 2. Change course to 265 degrees. Washington Control to Red Dog 1. Change course to 114 degrees. Over.
Red Dog 1 to Washington Control. Wilco, out.
About 4:30 a.m., Major Fournet received a long-distance telephone call from Robert Gina of Life magazine. He wanted permission for his people to interview the pilots of the first scramble at Newcastle. Major Fournet decided that under the circumstances, it would be wise for him to take the call.
Washington Control to Red Dog 1. Change course to 315 degrees. Over.
Red Dog 1 to Washington Control. Wilco, out.
Washington Control to Red Dog 1. Come in.
Red Dog 1 to Washington Control. Over.
Andrews Tower to Washington Control. Our scope shows Red Dog 1 is right in the middle of the unknowns.
Washington Control to Red Dog 1. Can you see anything on either side or to the front of you? Over.
Red Dog 1 to Washington Control. Can't see anything. Wait a minute. I see him. Yeah, I see him. They're all around me. They're moving in on me. They're coming closer. They're coming closer.
right at me. Hold it. They're moving off. I'm at maximum speed. They're going away. They're gone. I can't see them. Red Dog 1 to Washington Control. I've been given permission to return to base. Over.
Washington Control to Red Dog 1. Roger. Out.
At 6 a.m. that same morning, I called Lieutenant William Patterson, the pilot of Red Dog 1, who had made visual contact with the unknowns. He could add nothing more to what he had reported to us over the intercom. Later that same morning, the White House placed a call to the Pentagon. Captain Ruppelt, who had flown in from Wright-Patterson and who was only beginning his analysis of the sighting, got the call from the White House.
Yes, sir. It appears to have been caused by temperature inversion. Yes, sir. We've had cases where radar blips have been caused by temperature inversion.
This was Captain Ruppelt's report to President Truman. But Captain Ruppelt had not been present at the Washington sighting. It wasn't until later that he learned there had been both visual and radar contact with the unknowns on that night. On Monday morning, an avalanche of calls from newspapers throughout the nation jammed the trunk lines at the Pentagon. The relentless pressure continued. We admitted radar contacts from the 3 surrounding airfields.
When did the saucers first appear?
9 p.m.
How long were they under observation?
6 hours.
How many were there?
14.
Could the pilot see any details?
No.
In an interview which appeared in the Washington Times-Herald, Lieutenant Patterson, pilot of Red Dog 1, said he concentrated on one of the bright lights, but it outran him. I tried to make contact with the bogies below 1,000 feet, Patterson said. I saw several bright lights. I chased a single bright light. I was at my maximum speed. I ceased chasing it because I saw no chance of overtaking it. Under the insistent demands from the nation's press and the accumulating pressure of the public, the Chief of Staff set up a press conference at the Pentagon. I was present when General Sanford spoke for the newsreel cameras.
The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States. In pursuit of this obligation, since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations. However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve. We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion with respect to this remaining percentage, and that is that it does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate with to any conceivable threat to the United States. We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any agency of the United States.
When I left the Pentagon that evening, General Sanford's words kept running through my mind. Credible observers of relatively incredible things. The theories of the skeptics could not stand up to the actual experiences of high-ranking military personnel, radar experts, airline pilots, and other responsible witnesses referred to by General Sanford as credible observers. I started to walk through the streets of Washington, the words remaining with me, credible observers of relatively incredible things. I recalled, when I first joined the project at AMC, how I regarded with disbelief the whole subject of flying saucers. But piece by piece, the evidence had crystallized, until now, in my opinion, there was no doubt as to their existence. Now, so far as I was concerned, it was no longer a question of whether or not there were unknown objects flying in our atmosphere. For me, the only questions that remained were, what are these objects? Where do they come from? To me, the evidence indicated intelligence behind their control, and by now the belief that their source was interplanetary was no longer incredible.
This is the Montana film, projected exactly as it was photographed. The objects are moving against a 25 to 28 mile an hour wind. This is the film in double frame or slow motion. A slight bounce in the movement of the objects as well as the tower is perceptible. This is due to the handheld camera. The film, analyzed frame by frame, shows the movement of the objects to be horizontal and steady.
We will now vary the action and size of the objects and also stop the action from time to time for your study. We have just made a jump cut in the film to an enlarged size and reversed the action. You are now seeing the objects exactly as they were photographed, but from a closer perspective. Analysis reveals that the objects are not balloons, nor any kind of known aircraft. The images are very different from those produced by any kind of birds at any distance. The shape, brightness, speed, rectilinear path, steady motion, and separation rule out various forms of optical atmospheric mirages or cloud reflections. Comprehensive analysis has eliminated meteors and other known natural phenomena. The possibility of airplane reflection has been carefully studied and ruled out.
This is the Utah film as it was originally photographed.
The image structure and maneuvers definitely eliminate any kind of known aircraft.
This is where Chief Photographer Newhouse, in his excitement, changed exposure. He believed that by changing density and giving the film more contrast, he could clarify the objects. The single object that reversed its course. The bounce is due to handheld camera. Now we study the action of one section of the film. We stop the action. We move in.
Within a 5-mile range, aircraft could be determined. In excess of 5 miles, the speeds are greater than aircraft can achieve, except in straight-line speed runs. The movement here follows an elliptical or circular pattern. Microscopic examination reveals that the objects are well focused. Their size varies from 1/6 to 1/10 the size of the moon, as it appears to the naked eye. Their form is circular and sometimes elliptical. This fits the commonly used flying saucer description.
Observe the object in the upper left corner. We move in to study the action. The object upper left will go out of frame on widescreen projection. Observe the motion of the two objects upper right as we rock them back and forth. Now we move over and up on the frame to make a closer study of the object in the upper left corner.
Examine this object closely. Compare it with those objects you saw in the Montana film. These films were taken approximately 2 years apart, hundreds of miles apart.
We drop back to the original perspective and resume. Now the section of the film where photographer Newhouse changed exposure.
Weather conditions, together with the persistence and motion of the formations, eliminate the possibility of atmospheric mirages. Photogrammetric experiments have shown that the images cannot be associated with any kind of birds at any distance.
Stop. Now forward again. Stop. We drop back to original perspective. Now once again, and for the last time, the Utah film.
The objects cannot be associated with any known balloon observations.
For the last time, the Montana film.
The motion picture you have just seen is authentic. It is substantiated by documentation, eyewitness accounts supported by affidavits, and official government reports. The evidence has been presented to you with integrity and objectivity to establish the fact that unidentified flying objects, commonly known as flying saucers, do exist. Some kind of flying objects have been photographed in the sky. If they cannot be identified as objects known to man, what are they? If they are not man-made, who made them? If they are not from this planet, where are they from?